Aunt Margaret awoke from her sleep, and the rays of the morning sun forced her awake. The light was soft but insistent, reminding her that today was her first day of work after what seemed like an eternity. "I need to take my medicine," she thought anxiously. Panic gripped her at the mere thought of going outside. But financial reality weighed on her. Her cupboards were empty, her water was turned off, and her rent was overdue. For months now, she had been struggling to survive, trying to squeeze out the last of her savings. Her daughter Emily, though in her early 20s, was no better off, unemployed and dependent on her mother for survival. Desperation pushed Margaret to the edge. She had no choice but to get a job, as friends and acquaintances advised her. Most of them had already found ways to survive. Some were more morally flexible than others. Margaret dressed in the same outfit as before and decided to skip breakfast since there was no food left. At 50, Margaret's beauty still shone through her weathered skin, and she always prided herself on attracting attention despite her years. Before setting off, Margaret spent a few minutes browsing the internet classifieds, trying to find webcams for remote work, channels with lifestyle advice and the like. But the competition was fierce, and all the jobs went to younger, more glamorous women. Frustration boiled up inside her, but she suppressed it. She needed the money, and now. As Margaret headed to the local market, a group of teenage boys whistled and beckoned to her. "Hey, beautiful, do you have a daughter? Maybe we could meet her." She ignored them, focusing on the task at hand. At the market, she found herself in line behind a young woman who was no more than 19 years old. She watched the girl carefully, wondering what her life was like and if it was easier than her own. Margaret sighed, feeling the weight of the years she had lived and the struggles she faced every day. Suddenly, a man approached her with a camera in his hands. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "We're looking for an actress for a project. You'd be perfect for it." Margaret hesitated. The man was in his early 30s and possessed a sly charm that made her wary. "What's the project?" she asked cautiously. "It's a small production," he replied calmly. "We're making a movie, and we need someone to play the role of a teacher. It's nothing special, but we pay well." "Very good." The prospect of making quick money was tempting, too tempting to ignore. She followed the man to a dilapidated studio a few blocks away, where 6 young men were waiting for her. The cameras were set up, and the camera crew was eager to get to work. Margaret felt a strange chill run down her spine, but the promise of money calmed her doubts. When filming began, Margaret quickly realized that this was no ordinary movie. The atmosphere was somehow different, too secretive, too questionable. By the time she realized this, it was too late. The men weren't just making a movie, they were involved in something much darker. The cameras were rolling, but Margaret was no longer just an actress. She was trapped. Her stomach twisted with fear as she realized the situation she was in, but there was no turning back. A few hours later, when the filming was over, Margaret received a big reward, more money than she had ever seen before. But the nagging fear never left her. She had been asked to sign a contract for future projects, but something told her she had to leave soon. She tried to keep her composure as she nodded and took the money, but deep down she knew she had to leave before it was too late. Over the next few days, Margaret's anxiety grew. Something wasn't right about the people she was working with, and she began to suspect that she had unknowingly become part of an underground criminal gang. The money they were giving her was most likely dirty money from illegal activities. Every time she looked at the money, a sense of dread would overwhelm her, and she would struggle to fall asleep at night, fearful of what she had gotten herself into. The realization hit her hard one evening when Emily came home with a panicked look on her face. "Mom, I think someone is following me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Margaret's heart dropped. The people in the studio must have been watching her so she wouldn't reveal their operation. She hugged Emily tightly, her thoughts reeling with fear and guilt. She knew she had to act quickly. She couldn't risk her safety and that of her daughter. Margaret gathered up all the money they had given her and went to the police, laying out all the details to them. The police officers listened to her carefully, their faces growing increasingly grim as they realized the extent of the criminal organization she had fallen into. As she told her story, Margaret felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. She knew she had made the right choice, but she feared the consequences. A few days later, the police raided the studio, uncovering a whole network of illegal activity that surpassed anything Margaret could have imagined. Margaret was lauded as a hero for her bravery, but she was left shaken. The money she made was confiscated as evidence, and she and Emily were placed in the witness protection program. They had to leave everything behind: their home, their friends, their old life. It was a difficult transition, and the fear of being found never left Margaret. Although Margaret was desperate to find a way out of poverty, she realized that some of the offers were too good to be true. The price she nearly paid was far more than the money she received. As the days passed, she vowed to build her life anew, this time the right way. She and Emily moved to a small town under new names and slowly began to build their lives anew. Margaret found a job as a cashier at the local grocery store, and although the pay was modest, it was honest labor. Emily enrolled in community college, determined to accomplish something despite everything they had been through. Margaret often thought about those dark days and the choice she made out of desperation. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but she was determined to build a better life for herself and her daughter. She no longer let fear rule her. Every morning she woke up with a sense of purpose, ready for any challenge. Most importantly, she would never again allow herself to be seduced by promises that were too good to be true. The cost of her mistakes was too great, and she was determined never to repeat them. Margaret and Emily's bond grew stronger as they supported each other through difficult situations. They knew they had a long road ahead of them, but were willing to walk it together. They had experienced firsthand that nothing in life comes easy, and they were willing to fight for the future they deserved. Margaret promised herself that this time she would do the right thing, even if it meant starting at the bottom. For now, she knew that true happiness was not to be found in shortcuts or easy money, but in the strength of her love for her daughter and her hope for a brighter tomorrow.